Disqualified lawmaker Lau Siu-lai barred from rerunning for LegCo. Government elaborates on latest plans for land and housing. And China trade surplus with America widens in spite of tariff war.
Good evening. Former lawmaker Lau Siu-lai has been disqualified again. Authorities justified the decision by saying Lau had made a statement sympathetic to Hong Kong independence. This effectively bars her from the race to reclaim the LegCo seat she vacated over an improper oath back in 2016. Elmi Lung reports.
3 more days till the nomination period ends, but it's already the end of Lau Siu-lai's by-election dream. A returning officer today ruled her nomination invalid. Here's how the localist responded this morning before the official decision was made public.
It is ridiculous. I didn't receive any information and any request from the government. I think we have to put most of our effort, every bit of our effort to win this.
This being the Kowloon West geographical constituency seat she was forced to give up.
Lau
Siu-lai was elected after winning more than 38,000 votes. She took her first LegCo oath exactly 2 years ago today. In between each Chinese word, the lecturer paused for several seconds and ultimately spent around 10 minutes to take her oath. That oath was rejected. Weeks later, a successful attempt. The High Court ruled she did not genuinely and faithfully commit to obligations pledged after the government took legal action. She was therefore ousted from the legislature, which gave rise to the upcoming by-election scheduled for November 25th. Elmi Lung, TVB News.
The government expects its housing plans, announced in the policy address this week, will provide more than 600,000 flats. Sharon Tang with details.
Despite doubts about the wisdom of the idea, the government is pressing ahead with reclamation plans on the east side of Lantau Island. Dubbed the Lantau Tomorrow Vision, some 1,700 hectares of land will be created by reclaiming the waters near Khao Yi Chau and Hailing Chau. The development chief says a timeline has been established.
The first phase, where we have more concrete ideas. 2025, we would like to start reclamation. 2032, first move in. They all refer to Khao Yi Chau, the 1,000 hectare. We plan to go to our legislature for funding in first Q or second Q next year.
There is speculation that the project could cost $500 billion, around half of the city's fiscal reserves. Wong argued that this is a long-term project which makes the average costs incurred each year reasonable and affordable. To boost flat supply, the government will also raise the public-private housing ratio to 7:3. According to the Task Force on Land Supply, there are demands to develop brownfield sites in the new territories to build more public housing. That includes Hung Shui Kiu, Kutong North and Fanling North, which together yields about 760 hectares. But Wong says there are concerns. He says that these rural sites are dispersed and they are either situated within conservation areas or lack infrastructural and other ancillary facilities. That's made it difficult for authorities to create high-density housing there in the short run. Still, he stressed that his team is set to complete 2 research projects on the issue this year, which shall give more guidance on how they should progress. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
The chief executive attended another phone-in program today dominated by political issues. While she said universal suffrage will ultimately be achieved, she also reminded that Hong Kong does not enjoy full autonomy. Elmi Lung reports.
Remember this? In 2015, right after the Occupy movement, then Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying publicly denounced separatism with reference to a University magazine article. Since then, talk on Hong Kong independence hasn't gone away.
It was not him who was the first one to mention in the past years or so. It's this
not only talk, it's really just trying to invoke or provoke this idea. And under one country, two systems, everybody, and myself included, being my constitutional duty, will have to do something about it.
She refused to go into specifics on Victor Mallet's case. He's the British journalist who couldn't renew his work visa roughly 2 months after chairing a talk by a localist at the Foreign Correspondents Club.
If you look at the basic law, there are provisions that will make certain matters that are matters within the national interest. I am also accountable to the Central People's Government. If there are circumstances, I cannot close the door entirely that Hong Kong is exercising full autonomy. Hong Kong is enjoying a high degree of autonomy, but not full autonomy.
What about universal suffrage to elect the city's leader as highlighted in the Basic Law?
We will continue to strive ahead to find a way forward in giving people one person, one vote to select the chief executive. This subject is not entirely with Hong Kong. There is a National People's Congress decision that we will have to take into full account.
For now, she's bracing herself for possible resistance on plans to adjust cross-harbour tunnel fees. She fears legislators may oppose it to avoid upsetting voters. Elmi Long, TVB News.
A pro-establishment candidate who lost a LegCo race 2 years ago has been prosecuted by the city's anti-graft agency. Letitia Lee allegedly breached the elections ordinance. The ICAC says she received 9 donations that exceeded $22,000 from unknown donors. Yet she failed to ensure that amount wasn't used towards her election expenses and gave it instead to a public charity or trust. The 54-year-old lost her bid to win a seat in the New Territories East geographical constituency. She's been released on $5,000 bail before another hearing in 6 weeks' time.
In other news, China's trade surplus with the United States widened to a record $34.1 billion in September. This as exports to the American market rose by 13%, despite the worsening tariff war. The International Monetary Fund, however, is warning that the U.S.-China trade tension will hurt global economic growth. Alan Buknia reports.
Chinese exports to the United States have at least temporarily defied forecasts that they would weaken because of punitive American tariffs of up to 25%. September marked the second straight record month after August's $31 billion surplus. A spokesman for the General Administration of Customs said despite the instability caused by the trade fictions, the direct and indirect impact is generally under control. Export numbers have been boosted by producers rushing orders before American tariffs rose. An almost 10% drop in the value of the yuan has also helped exporters. Despite American complaints about Beijing's technology policy, Chinese leaders have rejected pressure to scale back plans for state-led development to become champions in global robotics and other technologies. The US and Europe say China's policy violates Beijing's free trade commitments. The US-China trade dispute dominated the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank on the Indonesian island of Bali.
Clearly, we need to de-escalate these disputes. But just as clearly, we need to reform the global trade system to make it even better, fairer, stronger, mutually beneficial to all nations.
The IMF's Asia director said Asian companies could try to develop new supply chains, but with limited effect.
If you exclude the US and China, which is number one, number two in global market in detention, all others can develop a new system which can actually compensate all this loss. That I'm very doubtful. So I think overall, I think the MD's remark, in the end, when there will be a no winner from the global trade tension. I think
the IMF predicts if the Sino-US trade dispute continues, global economic growth will shrink by almost 1%. Alan Buknia, TVB News.
Still to come on tonight's news, picking up the pieces after the devastation from Hurricane Michael. And world's longest commercial flight takes to the skies once more.
Hello， 你好啊！我係Nano嘅氣味傳心師嚟㗎。我一聞就知道你啱啱一定係去咗踢波啦。今朝仲食過煙肉蛋漢堡。
係減價嘅。
而家約咗女朋友食飯。
你哋係咪咩魔術節目嗰啲啊？你係魔術師。
咦，小姐，你約咗朋友食飯啊？你又知嘅？我仲聞到你啱啱做完運動添喎。好勁咩陣味？做咗瑜伽同跑步咧。今朝係咪仲去過 coffee shop 咧？唔想煙嘅氣味話俾人知你熱愛運動。下次洗衫連洗衣液一齊用，做完運動你都可以帶住香氣見朋友啦。
In the U.S. state of Florida, rescuers are searching for survivors in the wake of Hurricane Michael, the strongest storm ever to hit the Florida Panhandle. People who decided to stay in their homes were shocked at the fury of the storm.
When the wind and the rain really started picking up and the storm surge came through, it started shaking our house. And water started pouring through the kitchen window, the other windows in the house. And then all of a sudden, I noticed that things seemed to be moving outside, and I thought that trees were going by, and I realized it was our house. It had been broken off the foundation and was floating around.
Hurricane Michael all but erased the tiny community of Mexico Beach on Florida's Gulf Coast. It reduced some homes to mere concrete slabs and left others in shreds. Rescuers and residents struggled to get into town to assess the damage and search for the missing. Hurricane Michael's death toll of 7 is expected to rise.
U.S. President Donald Trump appeared willing to backtrack on his calls on Chicago police to adopt a stop-and-frisk strategy to combat crime. That's after rapper Kanye West, a Chicago native, told Trump the practice would only deepen racial tensions.
I think it's a shame what's happening in Chicago. I hate to see what's happening. They're having numbers of people being shot and killed. It's not for this country. So they have to do something, and I am totally open. If we can do it a different way, Kanye, I'm totally open. But they have to do, I mean, we all agree they have to do something.
And we also, as black people, we have to take a responsibility for what we're doing. We kill each other more than police officers. And that's not saying that the police officer is not an issue, because they are in a position of power.
The comments by Kanye West were part of his 10-minute-long monologue in the Oval Office that was laced with profanities. The pair discuss a wide range of issues. They include manufacturing, prison reform, and reducing gang violence in Chicago. The rapper also credited Trump for stopping a potential war with North Korea. Plus, he encouraged the president to swap his Air Force One jet for a hydrogen-powered plane. Stop and frisk was used extensively in New York City until it was deemed unconstitutional because of its impact on minority residents. Chicago reached an agreement with the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois back in 2015 to curb the practice.
Back locally, sources say the multi-billion-dollar Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge remains on track to open this month. Meanwhile, authorities have installed dozens of high-tech security cameras as part of efforts to protect the bridge. Christy Lung with details.
Along the mega bridge, visitors enter Hong Kong after passing this border point. Though there are still 12 kilometers to go before arriving at the city's border crossing facilities, visitors are not unguided. According to a paper submitted by the Security Bureau, security cameras with recording functions will be used along the Hong Kong section of the bridge to enhance its counter-terrorism surveillance capabilities. Unlike the low-definition cameras used by the Transport Department in urban areas, sources say 40 high-definition cameras have been installed, costing nearly $1 million. Christy Lim, TVB News.
An unemployed couple have admitted to abusing their 11-year-old, such as not allowing her to shower. Their case has now been adjourned for 4 weeks, pending reports from the probation officer and psychologist. Earlier, the court heard the parents on social welfare mistreated one of their 2 daughters. A social worker found their 11-year-old without warm clothes in their winter months. The girl with a cleft lip was even smacked and had in the head with a chopping board. And finally, the world's longest commercial flight has just arrived in New York. The Singapore Airlines plane took off from Singapore at 11:37 last night. After flying nearly 19 hours, it landed in New York at 6 this morning. The airline is using a fuel-efficient Airbus A350-900. It can fly up to 20 hours nonstop and serve 161 passengers. Singapore Airlines first launched the record-breaking route in 2004. It was canceled 9 years later due to rising fuel costs. And that's a wrap.